really happy to welcome you all for this webinar, CISERO webinar, organized by the CISERO project. And as you may know, CISERO is a CSA support action for the IPCEI community. I'm Fabiana De Carlo, and I work for Trust IT, which is an SME supporting European research and innovation project with the communication and dissemination services. We are proudly partner of the CISERO project. Today we are here for this webinar on the open source in cloud infrastructure for IPCEI CIS, challenges, opportunities, and strategic pathways. This is a part of a webinar series that CISERO is conducting in order to spread and raise awareness on important topics on digital sovereignty, and of course, open source is one of the most important ones. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by distinguished panelists of speakers, of experts in the field. We're going to have an introduction and a keynote speech from Sachiko Muto from the Open Forum Europe and RISE think tank. We're going to have two presentations from the CISERO project from our colleague from Cyril Chausson from IDC and Judith Taginus from VDI, both talking about some topic that we tackled within CISERO, so roadmap and governance for the IPCEI project. And then we're going to have a nice panel with some of the projects that actually work within the IPCEI ecosystem, and specifically will present some of their open source solution and their application. This panel will be moderated by our colleague Nermin Kujovic from VDI. And then I will close with some takeaways from our coordinators, Matthias Kohn. And with this, I don't want to stall much time from our panelists, and I will leave the floor to Sachiko Muto for her keynote speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabiana. And we practiced this right before, so I hope this is going to work seamlessly. Can you see my screen?
Yes, all perfect.
Wonderful, thank you. Now I lost everybody else.
I'm afraid we cannot hear you.
You can't hear me now?
No, we can.
Oh, okay. So it's just something to wake everybody up. Moment of panic, right? We actually had, we logged on the speakers 15 minutes beforehand, and I think that everybody felt confident that they didn't need those 15 minutes, but I think in the end we did, and and then something always happens anyhow. So anyway, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I'm, as Fabiana mentioned, I'm the chair of an organization called Open Forum Europe. I'm also a senior researcher at RISE, which stands for Research Institutes of Sweden. I saw that you had also mentioned that I'm a member of the board of the Drupal Association. I wear a couple of other hats in advisory roles. But I've been involved in researching and advocating for open source since about 2007. And so quite happy to be talking here about one of my favorite topics, which is how I think that we can strategically leverage open source, not only to sort of help strengthen Europe's digital sovereignty, but also to strengthen and grow the European economy and help European startups, etc. So on those sort of related topics, in 2019, I was one of the co-authors of a study for DG Connect, which talked about the contribution of open source to the European economy. And at the time, we also talked about technological independence. That was before everybody started talking about, or we kind of somehow converged on this notion of digital sovereignty. And I'm sure that, you know, everybody here probably followed the summit on digital sovereignty. Yesterday, a declaration came out of that where open source is mentioned. And I briefly thought last night that I would change my presentation, focus a bit more on what was said yesterday, but I thought I'd use actually my 10 minutes here to talk about something that I think is more impactful, because the declaration, you know, mentions a lot of things, and we have seen some of those things mentioned before. You know, in my role at Open Forum Europe, I got quite excited about the Tallinn Declaration and then the Berlin Declaration, you know, on sort of e-government, etc. But, you know, so some of those things you see, and but what really excited me in the last several weeks actually has been this publication by the European Commission of the sovereign cloud sovereignty framework. And I don't know if anybody here still has this on their sort of reading list. If you do, I really, you know, would recommend that you take the time to read it, because it's not that much longer than a declaration, a ministerial declaration. It's 6 pages, but it actually manages to take a political concept, a political objective, and try to break that down and see what are the components and how do we actually operationalize this. And so again, I think I will take my 10 minutes or what's remaining of that to look a little bit closer at this, because I know that it has it's been criticized by some people, or you know, it has been criticized. And I think, for example, if I read some of the criticisms have been around sort of that it can be gamed, it's not a pass-fail. It doesn't automatically exclude non-European hyperscalers, and it, you know, it might disadvantage SMEs, etc. And I hear those criticism. I can see where that comes from, but from my point of view, it's actually quite encouraging to see this kind of depth of engagement with the topic. And I think that, you know, I see it rather as a sort of quite a flexible tool that can be used by a contracting authority to decide on what their priorities are. And in that case, could also be, you know, it can also be turned into a pass-fail if that is sort of, if there's like one key requirement, let's say. But just the fact that it allows contracting authorities, or pushes them hopefully, to consider what are the aspects of digital sovereignty and how do we work to achieve it. And, you know, my personal opinion is that it's not a pass-fail. It's a quite complex topic. And just being sort of mindful of, you know, of all the components is already a very important step to take. And so I want to focus probably on, for me, what is the most important or the most interesting part for me. And I should say here that I'm talking about mainly about open source software. I understand that when it comes to sort of the supply, you know, the supply chain of critical materials and hardware, we have a slightly different story. But when it comes to software, I think, you know, for me, open source is really a key enabler, and should be the, you know, what underpins digital sovereignty. And there, I think, again, for me, what resonates with me most strongly is sovereignty objective 4, which is on operations sovereignty. I think if contracting authorities already had this in mind for a lot of procurement, we would come a long way actually to achieving or coming closer to more user control and digital sovereignty. And so here, again, more than insisting on the territorial origin of software, and even sort of the ownership of companies, etc. I think is really important to emphasize the importance of having access to the source code and documentation. And not just that, it's not just the license, it's not just the access to the code, it's really being mindful of, do we have the capabilities in Europe to maintain this code if we have to? And I think it shouldn't be that we start to build separate European technologies today. We should base our digital infrastructure on open source. We should engage strategically in the important open source projects. We should build and adapt on top of that, and sort of invest in taking strategic and leadership roles in the most critical projects. Mapping critical technologies is an important part of that as well. And I know that in CISERO project, you are already engaged in some of that activity. So, 10 minutes is very short. I realized that, even I thought I was going through things pretty quickly. I'm not going to be able to go through all my slides. So invite everybody to read up on this framework and consider all the aspects, and let the Commission know what's problematic about particular aspects, because I also don't think that everything makes sense for me. The origin of software, I don't know that that it's useful to think about the origin of software. It's more about sort of, is it open source? Can we fork it if we have to? If we do, can we maintain it? Do we have the skills and the companies in Europe that can do that for us? The role of ecosystems is very important. That's what I take away from this slide. And so again, it's published. The stated purpose is for a specific contract, but I think we all know that there are upcoming policies that will probably and revision of the procurement directive specifically. And I think this is a kind of a clear indication of where the Commission is looking to operationalize this concept of digital sovereignty. So again, procurement directive revision, this is something that I'm looking forward to getting engaged in. These days, everybody's talking about what can we do with procurement. And I am in favor, actually, of this notion of buying European. I think buying European means buying from and strengthening European companies. I don't think that we should be focusing on on funding specifically European technologies unless we have mapped and identified a clear gap where open source alternatives for critical software is lacking. Then I think mapping those gaps and developing open source software to fill those gaps, that's okay. But again, build on and leverage open source technologies that we depend on, and also in procurement, I think there's also this opportunity of promoting sustainability of those critical projects, and that means that we are able to give preference to companies that can show that they contribute back to open source projects, that they are taking leadership positions, maintainer roles in critical software projects. And again, don't close the door to collaboration, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying that we should just continue blindly to procure proprietary technologies from non-European hyperscalers. It's about understanding what we are building in Europe, but not closing the door to existing open source technologies and ecosystems. So I think I'm not so much over. I'm going to say thank you there. Please feel free to reach out to me with RISE. I'm also active in the Nexus Forum a sort of sister CSA to CISERO. We have, I co-chair an open source and digital sovereignty working group, which is open to outside participation. So if you're interested, you can reach me on email. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sachiko. Thank you very much for your insightful keynote. I will now move and leave the floor to Cyril Chasson to give a presentation from CISERO project. Floor is yours, Cyril.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So, do you see my screen? Do you see one screen? So, what do you see on screen, basically? Do you see my notes, or do you?
We see your notes. So.
Okay, let me. And what about this one?
Perfect.
This better, right? So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me in this webinar. So, I'm Cyril Chasson. I'm based in France. I'm leading the research program dedicated to application monetization strategy at IDC. IDC, if you're not familiar with IDC, this is a global, market intelligence organization based in the US. And for this presentation, actually, I'm really delighted to share some key insights regarding the open source, of course, the open source trends and kind of risk that the open source can bring also into this roadmap. Okay, so maybe to start, maybe let me give you a quick overview of what CISERO is and what is it about. So as you can see on the left side, so IDC and the whole team have already developed European, strategic roadmaps for at first industrial data, edge, cloud, of course. Those are mainly technical, legal, or political aspects of the roadmap. But the CISERO roadmap that we're talking about today actually is being developed to complement those roadmaps, right? And by adding some kind of market insights and, well, support the global adoption of sovereign European cloud edge capabilities, and of course, contributing to the CISERO community. So basically, CISERO will provide market-driven perspective, analysis trends, analyze trends as well, some kind of use case as well in the technical and non-technical factors which are really relevant to market adoption, and of course, open source is part of it. So you can see this is the roadmap, and this is the framework that we are adopting at IDC and CISERO. So you can see that open source and standardization is playing a key role, well, in this roadmap. So let's start with a bit of context, around open source and market trend and analysis as well. So why is open source a key component today of this roadmap? So basically, well, you can see that open source software is no longer a peripheral topic. It represents a pivotal inflection point into this digital transformation landscape and environment that you know exactly what I'm talking about. So look at basically the trajectory, look at the data. 55% of organizations in Europe are maintaining their use of open source, and almost nobody, well, this is not mentioned in the slide, but almost nobody is looking to decrease this reliance on open source, with only 1.5% considering reductions. So you are still on the, what do you see on the screen? Sorry.
We see the slide on open source as a strategic inflection point.
Very good, very good.
Yep.
Okay, that's the right one, yeah. So you can see that open source is also business critical for 30% of organizations. And you can also see that in a tight labor market with very rare specialists around open source and profiles and technical aspects, open source also acts as a level, I should say, as a tool, as a platform to not only attract people, but also to retain talent in organization. So why this renewed focus? So I should say what this new boost, obviously. So there are two new factors, one of the micro and technological level, the geopolitical tensions on the one side, and the other side, this is this AI revolution that we're talking about. So basically the narrative has a bit shifted, okay? So open source is now seen as the key enabler for digital sovereignty. This has been already mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. It can provide the transparency and the control needed for compliance, for example, especially with EU legislation. And in this context, open source is also becoming a strategic tool to reduce dependencies and, of course, vendor locking. So one of the reasons, of course, is that open source is considered as a tool for two things. The first thing is to build standardization, of course. But the way it also can be seen as a way to foster interoperability and compatibility between technology and modern environments. So what I'm talking about is about portability here. I'm talking about portability of data and portability of workloads and application, of course. So we see this everywhere at the infrastructure level. For example, Kubernetes is a de facto orchestration standard. OCI standardizes the containers. OpenStack standardizes the IaaS primitive. And let's talk about also Open API, the specifications, the open specification that can provide the machine-readable contract in terms of API interoperability, of course. So open source create this interoperability flywheel, okay, enabling truly multi-vendors and hybrid architecture that are related by organization into the market. This is why 30% of companies in Europe plan to increase their use of open source in their infrastructure. And by adopting this open standard, organization will gain the freedom from lock-in, which is mentioned by 44% as a key strategic factor. Let me dive into portability, because I do believe that open source is playing a key role at bringing on the table this interoperability. So what is key here to understand this is what you can see on this slide, that IT hybridization is now the norm, right? So organization, Europe and even in the world, must ensure that they can seamlessly switch between platforms, avoiding lock-in, reducing costs, and keeping their IT aligned, I should say always aligned on their business needs and of course business objectives, okay? So basically we're talking about aligning IT and business here. This is a very long story and very historical story here. So flexibility and interoperability are really critical for managing workloads, right? This workload swings, I should say, across different multiple environments. And this is not mentioned in the slide, but as new options like sovereign cloud enter the mix, of course, having that adaptability becomes even more important for European organization. So this slide, you can see two trends into these slides, right? Two key insights, basically. So we are at first observing a converging trend into the hybrid world, we should say also cloud diversity, which is a new trend. And another one is the repatriation of workload. And this is an increasing trend that we can see in 25, especially in this survey from IDC. So open source will, I should say, help organizations at creating this portability will, reducing the complexity in this workload shifting environment, and of course, decomplexify this technical resistance as well when you talk about portability and switching workloads and data between one platform to the other platform. Now, maybe let's have a look on the driver of open source, maybe in more detail. So they fall here under two main umbrellas, I should say. First, I've called it the structural driver, geopolitical sovereignty, okay? So those drivers are related to one, microeconomics, and the second one is about geopolitical context, okay? We're talking about data protection and compliance, and of course, digital sovereignty. The second one, this is what I call the technological driver. So it's about AI and data transparency revolution. So the rapid adoption of AI demands, well, that transparency, ethics, but also requires a large innovation wheel, of course, to build models and to customize technologies. So this is the first thing. And the second thing, it also requires compliance. to new regulation. And I will mention here the AI Act, for example. So if we come back to the topic of open source, right? Open source gives us the transparency here, auditability and control, which is required to navigate the European regulatory environment, of course, but also the capacity, the capability to create AI model, and of course, the compatible implementation. Let's focus now on the criticality of sovereignty. This is what you can see on screen. Geopolitical tension have really elevated digital autonomy to the strategic necessity, right? So, and this culture of technological sovereignty lies, of course, of open source because it enables fully auditable, verifiable stack and govern entirely within EU jurisdictions. Okay, so it isn't just about technology, it's about shaping a resilient and, of course, independent digital environment and, of course, digital future. So as you can see on screen on the left side, 1/3 of European organizations view open source as a key factor when they want to selecting their sovereign cloud partner. So this is really interesting here. So it's becoming really, I should say, a procurement criteria for some organizations across Europe. It indicates that basically that the role of open source is seen as I should say, a requirement for having and implement a trusted infrastructure. And the second major driver is basically the intersection of AI, automation, and regulatory compliance. Well, this is because of GenAI, of course, and the adoption of GenAI is increasing. So there is a greater emphasis on ethical, transparent, and open practices, especially in AI modeling. So that's why open source will directly address several major regulatory needs. So this is what you can see on the right side here. Of course, the European AI Act, this is what I already told you, but also the GDPR and the EU Data Act, of course, which require lots of interoperability and workload shifting process and ability as well. So, but the market, of course, is reacting. 61% of Western organizations are already willing to use open source AI model to build an application. So this is mainly because open source provides, and this is, you can see on the left side, auditability for 29% and learning and understanding for 27% of organizations across Europe. Looking deeper at this motivation, always, in this context of AI, it's clear that the primary driver here are not cost, right? Which is quite a bit surprising today, but it's not cost. It's not about, reducing cost, okay? So it's about flexibility and control. And the top reason organizations choose open source for AI is the ability to modify and adapt the technology to their specific needs. So it's not only, it's not a cost problem. It's a flexibility and the capability to customize their own model. And this is followed closely by the collaborative spirit, what is one of the main engine of open source, of course, which is considered as a true, engine for innovation. Maybe I don't have time anymore, so I'm gonna a bit go quicker. So let's address now the challenges, okay? The challenges of open source, because there are some challenges, of course. So we know that's while the benefits are clear, what are the challenges? I've already told you that open source is becoming more and more business critical, okay? So the first and the most urgent challenge here is security, okay? Open source is based on a decentralized engine of innovation, which is structured around 4 domains, communities, vendors, service providers, and foundations, okay? And all have a dedicated role to play in this ecosystem. And this global supply chain requires today a robust management to increase its resiliency, of course. So major incidents, you probably do remember the Log4j incident, have really shown that this low maintenance can severely impact organization and the other IT system and the job transfer systems as well. So organizations have already moving in this direction. And this is what I'm trying to show with this graph on the right side of the screen. So more than half of these European organizations expect to secure the open source software development lifecycle. And it has become a top priority in the next year. Other challenges, sorry, it's about community and project sustainability and governance. Okay, this has already been mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. So we must address those two key factors if we want to really capitalize on this, strategic inflection point I was mentioning at the beginning of my presentation. So currently, less than 30% of organizations have a formal OSPO. So this represents a true government gap today. And if we look further, the funding and contribution fragility of critical projects must also be addressed because they are only often maintained by small or no small dedicated team. Actually, only 14% of organizations are really active contributors during very, very critical projects. So this is a bit low, basically. And finally, fragmentation of projects is also a true challenge. So 22% of organizations find really difficult to stay up to date, with this open innovation, okay, with open source, with innovation in open source project. Because probably they have to follow multiple projects at the same time, and this requires lots of integration, and at the end probably it would increase the operational risk of implementing open source project. And it will be my last slide. Sorry if I'm a bit long. So I just want to stop there, and maybe let's have this widen the lens, I should say. What I want to say here is that the core principle of open source, well, that transparency, share resource, collaborative community, are also transforming not only the software, but it becomes an inspiration for multiple domains. And I'm talking about open government. You can design open science, open innovation, open data, and of course open hardware, which had already been mentioned. So basically, open source extends far beyond the code base and is becoming a true source of inspiration for innovators. So sorry if I've been too long. I will leave you with that. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, so feel free to shoot anytime. I would be happy to exchange next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cyril. Thank you very much. So I'll leave the floor really quickly to Judith then.
Yes, thank you. Just let me know when you can see my PowerPoint presentation, whether it's the presentation only. Yeah,
it's all good.
Okay,
yes, that's great.
Okay, good. So yeah, hi, I'm Judith Stegenes from BDI Technology Center, and I have been supporting the CISERO team since spring on the matter of governance. And today I will give you a brief overview of what we have learned about the challenges within the IPCEI CIS project regarding open source governance, licensing, and maintenance and interoperability. To our knowledge, there were no rules or requirements set at the beginning for the open source projects, and therefore now we try to catch up with that, identify and close gaps for the sake of this, and also, of course, of future IPCEIs. So hopefully it jumps to the next slide, does it? We have the same issue again. It's not jumping to the next slide. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you, but it's not
Yes.
moving the slides.
We had this before, unfortunately. Tamiris, can you? No. Okay. So,
Good.
okay. So I'll be quick. We go through the different challenge aspects, and because I didn't know the background of you, that I will just go a little into theory and then relate it to the IPCEI CIS specific issues. And if there's time for questions at the end, please ask. So yeah, let us address the matter of open source governance first, assuming that every open source project started with a specific purpose. The governance model as a set of rules and defined processes ensures that no random contributions can be made to the original code base, but that there's a decision maker that knows exactly what is good for the open source project. And in open source world, the decision makers are often elected by the community, and the authority to do so has been earned through merit and ability, hence the name meritocracy. But of course, there are other governance models, and I will not talk through all of them, except for the model where control stays with the open source project with a single individual organization. And this is then referred to as benevolent dictatorship, which is then quite the opposite. And in addition, some projects choose to be more open to external contributions, and others prefer to stay more closed. And all these processes, governance processes, should of course be transparent to contributors and be well documented. The governance model should also take care of issues related to intellectual properties and legal conformity, and clarify the terms under which contributors are contributing their code to the project. There are two common mechanisms. Contributors should at least agree to the developer certificate of origin. That is a really short and also easy to understand certificate, which at least asks for confirmation that the code may be contributed at all. And for major projects, the contributor license agreement provides a better legal and project-tailored certainty. This is then really a contract form which also needs to be signed by the contributor. So, to sum up, the advantage of governance model is manifold, as it ensures contribution and its quality through reliable processes, reduces risks such as related to security vulnerabilities, legal compliances, and ensures that there's a fair level playing field. Within IPCEI CIS now, we observe different governance scenarios. First of all, there are different strategies on when to actually open source one's code. While some partners keep it closed and proprietary until a final product is released, and sometimes that's just at the end of the funding period. Others choose earlier stages and remain in control of contributions to keep focus. When open sourcing, it should be done that the code meets an active and dedicated community that helps to develop and, as we heard, maintain the code, so that there are different considerations among the IPCEI CIS partners to take. And we know that some IPCEI CIS partners are well experienced and they have a well-established open source strategy, and others are still weighing the options. One of these options is the foundation-backed approach, which means code migration to an open source foundation. The advantage of this is that a foundation can incubate your project into a dedicated community that might be willing to maintain your project. And in addition, the foundation supports your project on all the formal and legal stuff just mentioned, plus funding. But keep in mind that you cannot just pick a foundation, because the community of that foundation typically also needs to approve and accept your project by a voting process. Now, it's not CISERO's place to make recommendations of what foundation might be suitable for your open source project, but from our interviews with various partners, we know that the focus of the open source foundation plays a significant role. So this might be they choose a foundation because it has a certain technical approach, such as being cloud native, being business oriented, or even domain specific. Some foundations might even have umbrella projects that your project might just fit under, and these umbrella projects come with more or less predefined and fixed governance models. Some foundations may give you options to set up a project with your own governance model, and that is, of course, conform with their foundation governance. But of course, depending on whatever option you take, there are different contract and fee schemes attached to it. So when considering code migration to an open source foundation, it is definitely worthwhile getting in touch with these organizations to discuss what they can offer for your project. And finally, you can still keep your open source project in your own repository under your own governance and build up your own community. Of course, this takes some experience, skills, efforts, and assets, but in the end, it's all about finding the right contributors. So next, we address the challenges of licenses within IPCEI CIS. Right ahead, license models and license compatibility are a complex matter, and at CISERO we cannot give legal advice, but we observe some trends within IPCEI CIS that might be helpful for orientation. An open source license is a binding legal agreement that provokes both rights and duties. For example, it allows us to view, to use, modify, and distribute the source code, but it insists that the copyright and license notice must at least be included in copies or derived works to ensure copyright preservation and legal conformity. The main open source licenses are copyleft and permissive licenses. the so-called copyleft effect inflicts that both the original open source software and derived works based on it are made available under the same or a compatible copyleft license, ensuring that the original work remains open source. In contrast, permissive licenses allow derived work to be licensed under different terms and conditions and become even closed and proprietary. This is why they are so of interest for business cases. Then there's the possibility of even dual and multiple licensing. And also noteworthy is that the versions of a license may differ in terms of conditions, and also different versions of a source code may be released with a different license. So there is really a lot to keep track on when it comes down to licenses. A greater challenge might even be when we integrate a third-party component into one's own open source component. And ideally, these third-party components, they come with a so-called software bill of material, which is an inventory of all open source and third-party components, their license versions and dependencies within the software product. However, since they may be sloppily maintained, it is well advised to always check the original notices of all third-party components. Basically, anyone can also write a license for their open source components, and licenses were sort of exploding in number. However, two major trends can be observed and over the last years, which is the percentage of permissive licenses is growing and is now, I think, it's last numbers that I read were more than 75% of all licenses. And second, only a few licenses luckily dominate increasingly the license market. For copyleft licenses, it's the GPL, and for permissive licenses, it's the MIT, Apache 2.0, and the Berkeley software distribution licenses. And the compatibility of these permissive licenses is already quite high. There are many guides on license compatibilities available, as well as online license compatibility tests. But of course, they do not provide legal reliability. Yes, I think that's enough what I want to say on this slide. So we know that IPCEI partners have been wondering what licenses are being used for open source projects. And so far, to our knowledge, I think that's on the next slide. Yes, sorry for that. So they are wondering which licenses are being used. And so far, to my knowledge, it's really that only common permissive licenses, such as the Apache, the MIT, or the BSD are being used. And we also know, however, that also third-party components are being integrated in IPCEI CIS, and some of them are even IPCEI CIS native, and others, they are external. And for that, it's important, again, that they check the software bill of material, and we can only recommend that IPCEI partners do this really thoroughly from the beginning, to keep things sort of clear. So interoperability, we know, I think most of us know what it is. It allows us, or it allows different cloud services of different providers to work seamlessly together across platforms, infrastructures, and data layers. As well, as we all know, IPCEI CIS is about the development of the first interoperable and openly accessible European data processor ecosystem. And how can we achieve that? Well, there's a conventional approach, which is to use open standards and protocols, APIs, and standardized data formats. This, however, often comes with a lot of documentation and complex processes and is considered to be rather bureaucratic and slow. However, there are certain fields of applications that cannot do with just de facto standards, and this approach would still be necessary for these use cases. Yet, what we can see also in IPCEI CIS happening is that in many other applications, the approach is more pragmatic. And that means that implementation precedes standardization, and standardization is just a result of establishment of standards because something simply does work. The advantage of this pragmatic approach is that it is much quicker, and interoperability is achieved where it is really needed. And as said, we know that there are the first projects working this way, and we are curious about other approaches within IPCEI CIS, how we can scale interoperability between all the different open source solutions. And finally, a last note on maintenance. well, it seems there at the moment there are two views on this. First of all, the IPCEI CIS partners, they might be looking more now for a community that accepts the open source project and continues development. But from a political point of view, it's also how can we keep things actually together on a long term beyond this IPCEI and the next IPCEIs, that is still like sort of a coherent, integrated project. And yeah, at the moment, we are conducting a survey on the IPCEI CIS open source components. That is sort of a start where we collect the IPCEI CIS components. And yeah, if you haven't done yet, it would be very great if you can just take some time to fill in your components into this survey. And that is the start where we can then have a, yeah, get a better overview of what is actually available already right now. So from this, what I just mentioned, there are several lessons learned. And among others, at CISERO, we want to achieve more transparency of the open source projects within IPCEI CIS. We want to support networking, enhance collaboration between the open source projects. And by doing so, we also want to support harmonization in governance models, license use and documentation, and also documentation quality, because we know that some descriptions might be more cryptic than others. And we want to understand what are the different approaches to achieve interoperability and identify interoperability success stories. We also want to understand the dynamics of the open source ecosystem of IPCEI CIS, such as code migration to foundations, and of course, make sure that best practices don't get lost. And please visit our website to know what else we want to do to support you. And of course, it would also be great if we get your feedback so we can keep on helping you and getting better at what we're doing. So thank you very much for your time. And I don't know whether I was,
It was okay. It was perfect. Thank you.
3 minutes long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But now it's time for the panel, and I'm not gonna steal much time from Nermin and colleagues.
Thank you.
So.
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you all for all of your introductory observations and very insightful also presentations. But it's time now to move on to our panel called Project Insights, Open Source Software in IPCEI CIS Cloud Infrastructure. I'll be the moderator of this panel. My name is Nermin Kujovic, coming from the VDI Technology Center from Germany. And I'm also the work package lead on governance and support within CISERO. So basically in this session, we want to get a bit closer to the ground. So how are open source solutions actually being built and used inside IPCEI CIS projects? How can these results live on beyond individual projects? And how do they connect to other initiatives in European cloud edge and telco ecosystems? So we'll do this in two parts, in two steps. First, I'll invite each of our panelists to give a short 5 to 6 minute introductory input. And then we'll move on into a moderated discussion and, of course, take a couple of questions from your side. So we're lucky to have 4 different perspectives with us today. Let me start with Jordi Guijarro Olivares. Jordi is a principal technologist at Open Nebula Systems, with more than 20 years of experience in cloud-oriented and cybersecurity architectures. He manages the IPCEI CIS One Next Gen project ecosystem, coordinates also the Virtora cluster in Workstream 2, and is also active in several other Horizon European projects and teaches also at the universities in Catalonia. So Jordi, I'd like to ask you to kick us off with a short overview. What is One Next Gen trying to solve? What are the key components you're working on, and how do you imagine basically other IPCEI CIS projects can realistically use your results? So the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Only you need to check, perfect.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thanks, good afternoon for everyone that is connected. And yes, let's go with this example of project. In this case, One Next Gen is Open Nebula Next Generation. And with only these 5 or 6 minutes, I want to try to link some of the, of the points that Sashiko, Cyril, Judith pointed out previously to our project. for like an introduction, what is Open Nebula? You more or less, some of you know that we are providing this open source cloud and edge platform. We are open source, project and company that we have the neutrality in, in our design. The first, you can see here, this neutral Kubernetes was mentioned like one of the standards, around running the applications of the workload. And with this, with our vision is that through our solution to build your cloud, multi-cloud, sovereign platforms, you can go with different brands of Kubernetes, for instance. You can orchestrate Kubernetes clusters through virtual machines. You can orchestrate containers at the end in a real multi-cloud environment solution that we deliver and demonstrate through the IPCEI CIS in the last GA with some demonstrations here. And mainly, after this cloud and virtualization, as a product demonstrated, we can go, with the continuum. That is that we are doing inside the IPCEI CIS with our individual project. With this in mind, if you check our timeline and align with some of the comments that previously was of the speakers done, you can see that this Open Nebula open source solution was born in Europe, was born from some years ago, and has like a timeline that can demonstrate that now with a specific product ready in our 7.0 version that was born in the IPCEI CIS activities with some of the partners, we can say, that the open source is, in our design with an Apache 2 license from the beginning. The motivations to have commercial support is because the community in this way wants to be some years ago, and now we continue with this idea, reaching some additional challenges. And, being, one of the European or most powerful tool for achieve this sovereignty in the cloud market. These words are, demonstrated with this timeline, and we continue, working because we believe, in the ecosystems and community to build the next generation Open Nebula systems. Is that why you can see here where our One Next Gen project is like a key component in the architecture. The IPCEI CIS program, we are very happy that it's delivering. We have a reference architecture that was presented and we contribute directly, and we follow the architecture to see how this open source solution can cover and fulfill until the use case and covering the infrastructure demands like a sandwich, if we can consider this paradigm that now is real. With security, sustainability, something that is impacting, is clear. With this, we are doing this alone, not. We are building, as you mentioned previously, we are coordinating the Virtuara thing with some of the partners at the end to build this cloud sovereign stack with different technologies, mainly focused to open source. And this is for us, will be success. We can coordinate, European and maybe not European technology to have this, stack. With this in mind, from use cases, from Workstream 4, Workstream 3, that is providing the data platforms, and from our side in Workstream 2, that we are delivering these cloud technologies to reach the hardware or to reach the network. At the end, we are building something that I think that we have to highlight today, is that we're now thinking in our AI continent and thinking about all the regulation that previously, for instance, was mentioned, allowed the Cyber Resilient Act or, the Data Act, following, the rules internally. And I think, sincerely, that if we are a European company that is working with open source and you are inside Europe and you are being impacted, whether we can say or use these words, by all these compliance frameworks, you are in different conditions, to offer service in Europe and continue working for this ideal technological sovereignty, with some of the partners. And this is like the next action from our side, like Factora. And Factora has to be a transversal integration pilot in IPCEI CIS that will demonstrate that we can, manage all these GPUs, all this hardware that's distributed in Europe, in a federation to run all these AI workload, mainly for inference and around LLMs. And this is more or less the idea for One Next Gen. At the end, and following some of the comments from the different speakers, is that for us, the community is very important. You can check our GitHub and to be part of this, please. And for us, the ecosystem and the community are the most important thing for an open source project that will continue, can be forked, and can be, part of this game. And thanks for to be invited today. And let's continue. Please, if you want to have any question, we are here.
Great. Thank you, Jordi. That was really a great and very short, but yeah, a very insightful again presentation of what you're doing. So let's just move us on to the foundational level, basically, with Christian Neu. Christian is a software architect at SAP. And yeah, he has been part of the open source program office there. He also helped, supporting the Corona Warn app and the Kulturpass, into the open source world. And is currently also leading the open source strategy of the SAP Aperora project. He is also currently serving as the NeoNephos governing board chair. So Christian, just give us in a few minutes, what is the NeoNephos story? Why was it created? How it connects to the IPCEI CIS project? And yeah, what it offers as a whole, for their open source outputs. Over to you.
Okay, so now I think you could hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Christian Neu. And I think what we also saw in the beginning with the 30% open source program office, I have the chance to work in one of the 30%. And as you said, I'm part of the NeoNephos Foundation and serving as a governing board chair. And with that, I would like to give a short introduction with a short problem statement. And I think everyone knows that the European cloud services market increases rapidly every year. And until 2028, it's predicted that we will see a volume of 110 billion euro from the study of BDO&L. And on the other side, this market is dominated by the US hyperscalers, while the European companies are constantly losing ground. And this was one reason, I guess, why the European Commission initiated IPCEI CIS. SAP is also part of that and joined that program, started their reference architecture. But for that, we required a legal European governance framework because SAP can develop something, but if it's not on an open ground, it's really hard to convince people joining that cause, right? And that was the reason, why we are talking about that. IPCEI CIS only recommended open source for spillover, but didn't mandate the foundation. I think that's also what Judith just said before. And we did a detailed assessment of what should we do, which foundation should we join, how should we do that, should we do that on our own, have our own foundation, or work together with another European foundation. Then we joined hands together with like-minded European companies and launched the NeoNephos Foundation at the CNCF KubeCon conference of the 2nd of April in London. And it's one of the largest open source conferences in the field of software development for the cloud. So the question is, why CNCF and why Linux Foundation? And to keep it short, if you really want to play in the Champions League, you have to join that league, right? And with that, we also had the chance to advertise the European IPCEI CIS ambitions and show everything here in front of over 14,000 developers in the audience, but also more online. And it directly had a big positive impact for us. And now to go back, what is actually NeoNephos? So we are a sub-foundation of the Linux Foundation Europe, and our mission is connected to the IPCEI CIS impulse. So we have a mission statement on what we want to develop, and that's like our roadmap on how we want to develop everything inside of that foundation. And our software we are developing, our development should not only excel that technically, but it reflects also our values like data protection or sustainability. And with that, we are also dedicated to shape a next generation cloud edge continuum, which is open, adaptable, it should be powerful, it should be secure, but it must be fully compliant and for anyone participating in the digital commons. And meanwhile, we have now over 15 members. We started with 7. Now we have reached over in 6 months 15. We have already donated 12 projects which have been donated, and we did some calculations in GitHub. How many contributors do we have which have just single commits, or how many active developers do we have who really wants to be part of something like that, and have over 600 community members which are engaging with us. And I think also what Judith said is our default license is Apache 2.0. So basically everyone can participate, and the common baseline should be that only if we work together, we can innovate an operable cloud edge continuum with the IPCEI CIS. And it's made in Europe, for Europe, and beyond. So basically everyone can use it. And we are just getting started. We are getting more and more projects at the moment, which are currently in the pipeline and being processed. But as a foundation really takes time to develop on its own. This is kind of a little bit slow, but we are getting there. And I think for next year, we have a lot on our roadmap. And to explain you a little bit how we operate. So for us, it was really important that we have European entity. So we needed to have something like it should be based in Brussels, like the European, like the Linux Foundation Europe, and it should safeguard the NeoNephos Foundation. It should provide a established legal structure like the Linux Foundation is doing. It has best practices how you can establish some legal structure like that, and it helps you structuring everything like how does financial budgets work and so on. Everything how that money comes in can be support for the projects. So the NeoNephos Foundation is collecting the money, and that is directly going to the projects which can improve the documentation or invest some money for compute for testing AI capabilities or whatever. NeoNephos itself is responsible for the governance oversight and giving the structure to the projects. And this is one of the benefits that this is not SAP anymore. I mean, I'm talking as also one SAP employee, but we really want to go away from that. And this takes time, but in the end, the benefits are that we will receive neutrality. We have open governance, bureaucracy, and the clarity of IP ownership with enterprise-friendly permissive licenses, just like the Apache license or something else. And with this, we have a really transparent structure where decisions are based on merits and projects which are in full control of who are vested into their project. So basically, no one can take the projects away or can hijack that. They are in full control of the development, and that's really important for that foundation. And with that, I think I can go also to the next slide, because I think you also asked me, okay, so how can people contribute actually to the foundation? There are basically 2 things how you can do that. So basically with funding, you can bring the financial financials to the foundation to help directly hiring more people developing functionality, or you can say, yeah, but I mean, I also need that software, so why not work together? Why not do some collaboration, bring in some people and work on the open source projects which matters. And for that, yeah, I mean, this is not only, I mean, this is one of the keynote which Gabriele held on the Open Source Summit in Amsterdam this year. And I think it really inspired me because it's really true, not only for NeoNephos, but for all foundations which we have in Europe. You can invest directly in the foundations, you can work with the communities, donate projects, or at least be a maintainer of a project. So there are so many possibilities. And with that, I would like to close my introduction and to come up with a call to action. So if you like what you see here with NeoNephos, please become part of that movement for digital future that we shape together. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christian, for sharing with us all the details on NeoNephos. As we are also tight with time, I would also like us to turn to Silva, which many of you will know as a major open source initiative for telco cloud in Europe. On this side, our first speaker is Nicolas Aumont. Nicolas is also a professional in project and partnership and people management in international and multicultural environments. He comes from Orange, from France. He oversaw the deployment of Orange, Spain's first telco cloud infrastructure back in 2018, and is of course involved in Silva since its early inception in 2020. Today he serves as a co-chairman of the Silva Directed Fund, where the project's long-term strategy is basically defined. So Nicolas, it would be great if you could share with us, what Silva is trying to achieve, what problems is it solving for telco cloud edge and edge in Europe, and where you see the most natural touch points with the IPCEI CIS project. So Nicolas, the floor is yours, maybe for the next 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Norman. Looks like the beginning of a job interview with my resume. Thank you very much. So, guys, today I'm not going to talk with my orange hat, but more with my silver hat, which is more important. So, I'm going to explain you where Silva is coming from, why we started Silva together with others. If the project is successful, the answer is yes, obviously. And then how you can use it, why it's a good idea to use it, and the touch point with the IPCEI. So Silva, why Silva? Silva is born in telco. We telecom operators have a big transformation for the past 10 years, which is called the virtualization of the network function. TLDR, before we were buying appliances, now we are buying software, these network functions. We need a cloud to execute them. It's a private, dedicated cloud. We call it the telco cloud. So with this transformation came a lot of good stuff, programmability, automation at scale, but a few challenges as well. The biggest one, the fragmentation. When we buy a network function from a vendor, it runs on the telco cloud of this vendor. But if I buy another one from a different vendor, it's not going to run on the telco cloud of the first one. So I need another telco cloud. And if I have more providers, each time telco cloud is different. So it creates silos, which are not good. And this is what we call fragmentation. So our vision at Orange, strategic vision, was to have what we call an horizontal telco cloud, which is able to execute network function from vendor A, B, C, D without any problem. So this is a strategic view. And in order to implement it, we went for Silva. We went for Silva, it's a bit more than that. We had a choice. Do we do it alone or together? Obviously, we decided to go together. And that's why with Dutch Telecom, Telefonica, Telecom Italia, Vodafone, but also Nokia and Ericsson, we created Silva. So what is Silva? Silva, basically, it's a Linux, it's an open source project under the Linux Foundation. And it does two things. First, Silva is not a specification or standardization project, it's a delivery project. So it delivers a telco cloud stack, or might I say, a cloud stack that is addressing telecom use cases, but more. also edge use cases, and maybe also IT use cases. The second thing Silva does is that we have validation centers. We have 8 validation centers where we deploy the Silva stack, and we invite network function providers or application providers to come and onboard their application on top of the stack to check that it's working. Then it's certified. And when you do that, you do centrally 90% of the integration, and you are able to replicate the deployment wherever the stack is deployed. So this is basically the core of the Silva project. Now, it happens that the Silva project was 3 years old, is 3 years old. It was last week, the birthday. And so where are we now? We started with 7 founding members, and now we have 35 companies actively contributing to the project. I saw the stat for NeoNefos, so we have more than 700 followers on the Slack of the project. And Silva is delivering 3 production-grade versions of the stack per year since the beginning. It is also deployed in production environments within Orange, across all our affiliates in Europe, but also in Africa. So this is for the production part. And let's say for such a young project, it's quite a success. We have 16 funding members, financing members, sponsors, which is also good for the project. So I told you Silva was born in telecom, but I think it's going beyond now, because within the IPCEI, it's also used within the Labora pilot, where companies are providing edge nodes. And I had a very pleasant surprise to see that a lot of companies are using the Silva stack to power this edge node, including non-telecom companies, which is very important for us. That's why I'm saying Silva is going beyond telecom. Another important aspect for me is Silva is not only a technological project. We also took care about the industrial model. And this is very important because when you're the CTO of a company, technology is important, but sleeping well at night is also very important. That's why we organize the reassurance of the project in production by having several companies, like SUSE, for instance, who are providing these kind of professional services, allowing us to say, okay, we have top-notch technical contributors. We also have a robust industrial model to go in production. So that's also a key differentiator of the project. And in terms of open source, so Silva is within the Linux Foundation, 100% open source. It integrates the components mostly from the CNCF. We also had a choice, joint venture or open source project. We chose the open source project because it's easier to onboard new members, because Silva is a community project, so it means it's open to new companies. And it was for us better for the adoption and to have a truly wide usage of the stack. And within the IPCEI, we get a great accelerator with the IPCEI, not only the funding, but also, you know, the proximity with other companies like we get in the Labora pilot. I can talk long about the project, but if we have a timing, I think that will serve as an introduction to it's time for my fellow Kai to continue.
That's great. That was actually the intention. Thank you, Nicholas, for giving us an introduction into, you know, Silva as such. And yeah, as you said, let's stay with Silva and now shift to the operator perspective. Kai Steuernagel from Deutsche Telekom. Yeah, just briefly, Kai is currently serving as Vice President for Cloud Technologies within the Deutsche Telekom Group Technology, and he's also a co-chair of the Silva Governance Board. Kai, from your perspective, from your view, how does Silva and open source more broadly show up in real deployments? What makes these kind of stacks attractive or challenging? And yeah, just a few insights from your side as well to share with you. Over to you.
Okay, sure. And thanks for having me. Yeah, and Nicolas explained it, yeah, perfectly. So what is kind of also the motivation, and it's very similar on our side, but let me start a little bit before that. So because we are talking about a telco cloud stack, A telco cloud stack is basically, it's a cloud stack, but it's something specific to that, because when we talk about a telco cloud, we are hosting network functions. So network functions, abstract word, a 5G core is a network function, right? And you can assume that the network function of the cloud itself, the network performance, the latency, the availability of 5 nines, these are very specific requirements for a telco cloud. And so also we at Deutsche Telekom, we have initially taken a different path. So we also thought, okay, how to create that, how to build that. So when the network functions were kind of cloudified and we started in that and want to have it based on a modern Kubernetes platform, which one to take? And we decided, okay, let's build it on our own. And other than Orange, we took the way that we really have a development team creating that, building it on open source components, having some components, commercial components in, but we customize a lot. We did host-based routing, for example, to really get the performance out of the routing. We added Kubernetes operators in order to ease the deployment, and so on and so on. So it's now in production since years, also with 5G core applications and such. But we are lacking something in that. So even if it's now out in several European countries in our footprint, or in all of them, the thing we are lacking is the support by the suppliers, because it's still the Deutsche Telekom cloud. We call it TCAS, Telecom Container as a Service. And so it is still kind of the telecom cloud, which needs support from the suppliers. And every time we have a new function coming in, we need to get it adopted to our platform and slowing the time to market, essentially. So now we want to change it. We joined Silver, and even when our solution is already pretty mature, we see a lot of benefit in Silver. So we have a larger community to rely on. That is, the open source community helps a lot to maintain that code, to get new features in faster, to ensure security, resilience, stability of the whole platform much better than if we would do it on our own. So we have a faster time to market with the vendors getting approved kind of with the Silver validation centers. They have seen the solution already, and when they come to us, they have probably done it somewhere else as well, or vice versa. So we can build also on that expertise and kind of the openness and the willingness of the network function suppliers to build it according to the Silver standard. Open source, so we could also wait for some standardization process, but open source is simply faster than any standardization. So I don't have ideas. So if I would assume, let's say, standardization organization like GSMA or whoever would then take over to say, okay, let's standardize this stuff, it would take a decade. Yeah, but we need it now, so we can't wait for that. So it's obviously open source is a better way to get there, to have really also Silver as a reference implementation rather than just a standard definition, right? So it comes with the code, right? So that is actually what we need. And what we also made sure in Silver is that we try to close the gap with the IT industry. So we know that the IT industry it's much faster than the telco industry. Telco is relatively slow. The world has turned 3 times before the anti-world rolls once, right? So it's really, we need to cope with that. We really need to close that gap. And we also want to converge in the networking with the services in a way. And that is also something we can deliver through Silver faster than if we would do it on our own. And also, because we are always talking also about the edge, and if I talk about core applications like a 5G core, we can see that this is at the edge of the network if we look at it from the IT perspective, because these functions are deployed closer to the users, then it's not only one data center or one region in a country, but yeah, it's multiple. So it's many of those already. So we can consider this is kind of the edge we are looking for. So we are already there. So it's also a good fit to our or IPCEI CIS program in that way. So that's also why we think it's very much related to those activities. So we are now kind of contributing to Silver, getting kind of also consuming back, looking into further areas where we can, also improve it better to build upon this open source community. Also because of the European sovereignty. Open source alone is not saying once it's open source, it's sovereign, and that doesn't work, right? So it means it's only sovereign if we have also some knowledge about the code in the project. If we can maintain it on our own, if something breaks, the problem in Kubernetes, which is coming from Google, if I don't have kind of the idea what is in Kubernetes, how it is working, I cannot kind of fork the program if it's taken kind of off the open source path and pulling into some commercial path. So I need to have knowledge about that, and that is what we also maintain. And it's also important to say Silver is under Linux Foundation Europe. So it's kind of one of the first projects started under this relatively new organizations like Neonefosys as well. So we think an open source project needs to be kind of, if it's only one organization contributing 90% or then it's probably not healthy. So we think 60% for one company, and then it starts to get healthy. So if it goes below that one, otherwise it's really sticking. It's open source, but it's driven by one company, and it's not really. If that company steps out, the project will be dead. So also a good reason why not only to consume this stuff, but also to contribute and to actively get involved. And that is kind of the call out for all those who want to contribute. Yeah, this is a good reason, another good reason to do that. So that is our view on that project. And I really appreciate also being able to sit on the board and to steer into the future of that stack also in the future. Thank you.
That's very important. Thank you all. So basically, we are, I think, just on time. I'm not sure whether we'll have sufficient, more time to get any questions from the audience. I know that people generally don't like, going over time. So if there are no questions from the audience, I would like to thank all of the panelists. I think we had a very insightful presentations, both from Jordi, from Christian on the Neonefos, from Nicholas and Kai on Silva. And I would, with that, I will definitely also allow for all of the participants to come back to CISERO in case you want to get in touch with some of the panelists, in case you want to discuss something deeper in detail. I'm pretty sure they will find some time. And with just on time, I would then hand over to our last and kind of concluding remarks from our DLR coordinators from CISERO. Matthias, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Namin. Well, you already did a kind of summary, but what I can do is again to emphasize that Shiko has to leave now. Really pointed out how open source can be strategically used, and that was reflected and also in the market description from Cyril. So I think there it was also important to see what we need to do to make it for SMEs easier also to jump on the bandwagon and better may use open source and keep up with this
fast innovation cycles. Yu's introduction on the lessons we learned so far, I think, was very helpful, and we will continue describing what we think are the necessary or already gathered learnings from the IPCEI projects on open source to have here a good community of knowledge on that. And well, on Jordi's contribution, I like how he described their contribution to European sovereignty. And but for Christian Noy, he talked about bureaucracy. I think with this now already 12 projects, it's important how the governance then handles this complete stack, because also in the summit we had yesterday here in Berlin, there was much talk about that the advantage of the so-called hyperscalers is that they offer the complete stack, and that open source developments currently are maybe a bit more scattered, and we have to see how we can deal with that. On the Silver project, I think Nicolas described very well how especially the testbed in Labora helps to get more companies on board. This is what is, of course, important now, and that we from the CISERO project also want to support. Of course, also interesting, Kai told us that with open source, the development cycles get much faster. That's also good news. What can I do? Finally, I can again hint you on the open source survey that we have currently running. Judith already did that. You can see it here with a QR code. Would be good that everyone within the IPCEI project, but also contributors that develop cloud solutions beyond the IPCEI CIS have a look at this survey and contribute to the survey, and we will then start building catalog that wants to map the different solutions on the reference architecture. And what we also have on the CISERO website is this reference architecture that's currently available in version 1. And I think relatively soon, hopefully within the next months, there will be a version 2, which then will also be published here. And yeah, with this, I want to thank all the participants and wish you further success with your open source developments, and hope that we will really have a strong support of the European sovereignty demands that were so prominent during the EU summit on sovereignty. Thanks to you all, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.